Not very long ago, in the top left-hand corner of Wales, there was a railway. It wasn't a very long railway or a very important railway, but it was called the Merioneth and Llantysilio Rail Traction Company Limited, and it was all there was. And in the shed, in the siding at the end of the railway, lives the locomotive of the Merioneth and Llantysilio Rail Traction Company Limited, which was a long name for a little engine, so his friends just called him Ivor. The tale of the plucky little happy-go-lucky engine began as most stories began, from history. The start of Ivor's story goes all the way back to 1948. A young Oliver Postgate was studying at a local drama school. There he met an unlikely person by the name of Denzil Ellis. The two became friends, and Denzil spoke of his past. He told Oliver one day about how he had worked on the railway as a fireman to the big mainland engines. He spoke of his jobs that he would do, including the more mundane tasks of firelighting. He spoke of how he would go to the sheds early morning and wake the engines. He would rake out the ash from the night before and remove any clinker. He would always be astounded every day that his little fire, made from just a few pieces of wood and paper, would send over 100 tons of metal flying up the main line. He concluded that with his experience, it would make a very good story. Oliver wholeheartedly agreed. After finishing his schooling, Oliver found his footing in the entertainment industry, not as an actor, but as a producer. He produced Alexander the Mouse and several others for his bosses at ITV, but he wanted to branch out and make his own. Oliver entered a partnership with animator Peter Firmin and created a new company called Small Films. Like all greats, their beginnings were humble, and its head office and animator studio was an old cow shed at Peter's home. Thinking back to the words of his old friend Denzil, Peter wanted to bring his stories to life, and inspired by the words and works of Dylan Thomas, the setting for this new series would not be a grand station or a mainline railway, but a single line and a number of quaint villages collated from memories from many different people. In Wales, thanks to its coal industry, it was not uncommon for single lines to intertwine around the hills, with maybe one or two smaller engines doing the work of moving coal and goods from village to village. Like any good story, the more the pair thought about the setting, the more vivid it became. Soon maps were being drawn showing key locations, complete with viaducts, villages, and all in their right places. Once the scripts were written and the characters decided upon, unusually in animation, the soundtrack led the way. Normally, storyboards were written up and the majority of the animation would be completed before the sound was added to it and the pair married up. In Oliver's and Peter's case, they swapped it and married the sound to the animation, with Oliver focusing on the sound and Peter focusing on the drawings. The drawings are quite honestly works of art. The backgrounds were a mix of watercolour and pastel and were on long reams of paper. Oliver and Peter would stretch these out and overlay the cardboard figures. They used stop-motion animation to bring their creation to life. The head and the limbs of the characters were created separately and could be added on when needed. For example, if the character needed to smile, then a smiling face was added. If they needed to look up, Peter would draw the head separately, cut it out, and it would be tacked onto the body using blue tack. The movements equaled to 1/4 of a second of film, meaning that for one 10-minute episode, over 16,000 frames were shot. And on film, Ivor's world came to life. The first production run included 6 10-minute black and white films for the company, Associated Redfusion, then followed by 2 13-minute films. Associated Redfusion loved the new mid-afternoon shows, even stopping their weekly board meetings halfway through just to watch the new episode air. They ran the episodes until 1968, when the company folded, and the rights to the films were transferred back to Small Films in 1975. When Small Films was given their rights back, Peter and Oliver set to work again, this time redoing the films into 40 5-minute films and in full colour. The shorter segments were perfect at tea time at 20 to 6 and just before the news, and the kids loved it. It ran regularly until the 1980s and has seen revivals until Oliver's sad passing in 2008 and Peter's 10 years later. Unlike the steam engines you find on the main line, Ivor is very much alive and has a mind of his own. He doesn't need a driver to drive himself, and he speaks through his whistle. Ivor can show real emotion and desires, even shedding a tear or two when he is sad. Ivor's biggest dream was to sing in the Grumbly and District Choral Society. Thanks to a clever adaptation of his whistle and the pipes from an old steam calliope, he was able to fulfill his dream and take part in the weekly choir practice, becoming first bass. His voice is provided by a bassoon, and his famous chuffing sound is provided by Peter himself. Ivor really enjoys, most of all, doing similar things that most of his friends do. He enjoys going to the beach and swimming in the sea, until his firebox gets wet. And then when his driver and friend Jones the Steam makes tea from his boiler. But he can be disobedient and headstrong at times. There are several points where he is berated by Jones the Steam for stopping too quickly, and, unlike other engines of his type, he hates shunting and timetables. Edwin Jones, or Jones the Steam, works as Ivor's driver and closest friend. Jones the Steam is a kind-hearted man who understands Ivor more than most people and frequently translates for Ivor. To people outside the duo's inner circle, Jones the Steam can seem a little strange talking to an engine, but Jones is a man with a cope-with-all attitude. In his spare time, when he's not tending to Ivor, Jones likes to go fishing and daydreaming. Di Station is the station master at Laniog Station and is polar opposite to Jones the Steam and Ivor. Di is a stickler for the rules and regulations of the railway, and it greatly upsets him when Ivor goes off on his own. Di often loves fishing and will join Jones at the riverside. As much as his rules and regulations were important, Di knew the importance of keeping the status quo, and when the idea was put forward to buying the railway using Welsh gold, it was Di that spoke up against it, citing that the news of gold in the hills would prompt gold diggers to come and spoil what they had. Evan Evans, or Evans the Song, is Jones the Steam's brother-in-law and choirmaster to the Grumbly and District Choral Society. It was him that Jones the Steam approached when he found out of Ivor's dream to join in on the choir, after hearing them practice one evening. Evans the Song at first dismissed Ivor, saying that the single tone of his whistle was a note that was very rarely played, if ever. So Ivor had a special set of whistles constructed out of an old steam organ. Upon hearing the new pipes, Evans the Song knew Ivor would be perfect as first base, with Di Station ensuring that head office, Ivor's owners, were aware and happy to pay the subscription. Evans the Song encourages the choir to show off their talents, and Ivor takes the choir to competitions and was lucky enough to win one. Evans the Song is very proud of Ivor and is happy to accommodate, even allowing him to wear the top prize of a silver wreath around his funnel and join the society on day trips. Idris is a small Welsh dragon who Jones the Steam and Ivor found as an egg on Smoke Hill. Assuming the egg was a hot stone, Jones placed it in Ivor's firebox, hatching it. The young dragon hid within Ivor's boiler until choir practice, when, unable to contain himself any longer, began to join in. The dragon is now a favourite member of the society and enjoys sitting in Ivor's funnel. Idris, being a hot dragon, despises cold and water and spends his time either travelling around in Ivor's firebox or spending time at the baker's near the ovens. Over the course of time, Idris found a female dragon called Alwyn, and both dragons bask in the joys of parenthood. The dragons are very shy creatures, and when the local Antiquitan Society announced that they were looking for them, he ran away and hid on Smoke Hill. At the hill, he discovered that the volcano was starting to go out. Jones the Steam and Ivor proved the dragons existed to help them survive, so the society arranged for a gas meter to be fitted to the volcano, keeping the volcano warm. The Antiquitan Society, though, were concerned with the amount of money that the meter was costing, and when the dragons attacked a statue of St. George, killing a dragon, the society branded them a menace and wanted to lock the dragons away. Thankfully for the dragon family, they were able to escape with the help of Mr. Dinwiddie, the old prospector, who, after digging for gold, found a hot cave for the family to live in comfort. The dragons, thankful not to be persecuted any further, moved into the caves, where they remained to this day. These are just a few of the scores of both human and animal characters that interact with Ivor on a daily basis, but it's their simple charm and uniqueness that make each character so likeable and memorable. While Ivor rarely goes from his lovely home, he does, once a year, visit the Langdon Railway, where he gives rides to guests, although he rarely sings. Without the choral society behind him, he's simply too shy. Other references to Ivor can be found at the Festiniog Railway. On the narrow gauge line, far away from any roads, sits the quaint cottage of Ciard Badot. This cottage, originally home to the superintendent of the railway, was built in 1864 and has its own little platform where the homeowners could flag down a passing engine and take them on. The little cottage was soon a holiday home, but by 2017 it fell into disrepair. Desperate to save the cottage, the line, which many liken to Ivor's line, raised nearly £500,000 to restore the cottage and is now a firm feature. The cottage can be rented even today, with prices around £400 a week. If you ask anyone on the railway, I'm sure they would have seen Ivor and know that he is a firm favourite. Ivor the Engine is getting a revival on BBC, with many of the episodes being shown during the winter, and I've heard on the horizon of a live-action movie potentially in the works. But it's all thanks to Peter, Oliver, and a chance meeting at a drama school that this lovely little masterpiece was born.